everybody. It's that time again for another Advocacy with Adam with the Alaska Airmen's Association. And again, I've got a long list of things here to talk about, and it just seems like that we were just together, not just here on social media, but was able to see a lot of you at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering and then at Valdez. And so, yeah, the summer has kicked off with the activities, although the weather, debatable whether or not it's summer. Valdez was a lot of fun, kind of wet and a little chilly. The winds were blowing really strong at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, but we were able to get airplanes in and out and all of those things as well. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in and get right to it, because I want to kind of give you a recap of some things. Again, thank you for those of you who came up to speak to me at the gathering and at Valdez. I appreciate the feedback. Was able to learn some personal stories about some of the issues that we're working and be able to use some of those already in some meetings to give some direct impact to what's going on with some of the government affairs issues that I'm tracking on behalf of our membership here at the Alaska Airmen's Association. So with that, got some great news. Actually, some other things that are coming up next week with the Anchorage airspace redesign that's still underway. Next week is going to be the Safety Risk Management Panel, and going through some of the proposals and the changes and the VFR procedures and working through that panel to see what kind of risk we may be adding to the national airspace system. I'm going to be part of those meetings as a subject matter expert, and so I'll be able to be in the room and offer up some advice and opinions. Not a full panel member, however, because I'm not an FAA employee. And the way those panels work, that you have to be an employee of the government to be on the actual panel, a voting member of the safety risk management panels. But I am a subject matter expert and able to participate in the process. So look for some more information about that. And as we get further along, I'm just looking down my list. The next opportunity for some public engagement in that Anchorage airspace redesign is going to be after that safety risk management panel meets and the risks have been mitigated. And then that final proposal will go out in a notice of proposed rulemaking. And I expect that before fall, we'll have an opportunity to comment again as part of that whole procedure. One of the, well, I said procedure, as part of the whole airspace. Procedures is where I'm going to next. One of the things I've been pushing for a very long time, and it's nice to see ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot work through some of their dynamic procedures or smart charts, depending on which brand you're looking at as to what they call that. But a way to break down some IFR procedures into a little easier form and a little easier to digest live in the cockpit while you're flying these procedures. We've long time asked for the same kind of product for VFR procedures. The problem has been, however, that the FAA does not produce any geo-referenced VFR procedures. There's very few actual VFR procedures that the FAA publishes. However, there's a lot of them in Anchorage. Nationwide, there's not very many, but those of us that fly in and out of the Anchorage Bowl, we are familiar with those, of which, by the way, there's going to be some new procedures in other parts of the state that are going to be very similar to the type of operations getting out of Anchorage, and that's going to be for Chena Marina outside of the, just inside actually, the Class Delta at Fairbanks International. Now, what does that have to do with dynamic procedures or smart charts? Well, I recently got some news that the FAA is now working through the process to see what it would take to geo-reference those procedures. While there are some waypoints in those procedures that are in the GPS database today, going forward with the new airspace proposal for Anchorage, the FAA is working through that process. No actual guarantees just yet because they haven't finalized the products, but they are working towards geo-referencing those VFR procedures. Now, what does that mean for us as aviators? Well, then at that point, third-party chart applications like ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot or some of the others can digest that information the same way they would a standard instrument arrival or a standard departure procedure, and chart those things and bring them up as a layer in your EFB, your electronic flight bag. That is a huge safety enhancement in my opinion, and I want to say thank you to those within the FAA that did not take no for an answer because that was the initial response from the FAA, is that we don't have a product like that. We don't have the ability to do that right now. And that's not the final answer. So I'm encouraged by that. Again, however, though, no guarantees at this point, but just wanted to give you the heads up that that's something I've been working on for a long time on behalf of our membership. And we've got some positive traction and movement in that, that issue. So we'll look to see what those procedures look like going forward with the Anchorage airspace redesign. Speaking of some new things that we've been asking for a long time that the FAA has now delivered on, Google Earth. How many of you are aware of the ADS-B coverage maps that are presented in Google Earth? We'll include a link here, a QR code, to be able to go and see those, be able to see that website that the FAA has where you can download that Google Earth file and turn it on as a layer in Google Earth. Up till now, the FAA had been delivering that information as a splat map, as we call it. It's basically a coverage area based off of computer models, and it was on above ground level altitudes. And I'll tell you, that information is helpful, but that's not the way we fly, is it? We don't fly, our altimeters are not set to above ground level. Our altimeters are set above mean sea level. And so thank you to the FAA for developing a chart layer for Alaska for the ADS-B coverage in mean sea level. And you can hear the aviation noise in the background, most likely, some of you. We got some folks in the pattern today here in Nenana. Great to see aviation alive and well, for sure. But back to the Google Earth layer. I'll include a screenshot here from a presentation I gave at Valdez of that layer and what it looks like. And you can go back and download that layer yourself and play around with Google Earth. I'll tell you, the MSL layer is pretty accurate. I've been able to check that out myself flying around here the past month or so, and it's pretty accurate, at least here in the interior part of the state, as to where you can anticipate getting that information from a ADS-B ground station. And what is that information again? Well, that's the Flight Information Service broadcast. That's FISB. That's your METARs, that's your radar, weather radar, that's your NOTAMs, that's terminal forecast. All those things are all products of FISB that come in through that source. Now, that does not affect the traffic that you would get peer-to-peer, but it also does affect in the coverage areas of that ADSR, that rebroadcast of the traffic data. So that Google Earth layer, very thankful and very helpful now that it is in MSL as well as in AGL as a different layer. So go take a look at that. Now, that is only, however, for Alaska. So all of the folks watching this from the lower 48, sorry, Alaska has something that you don't. And I apologize for that, but the FAA wanted to get out that data for Alaska because we've been asking for that for a very long time. And if you think it would be valuable to have that for the entire United States, a MSL layer for ADS-B coverage on that Google Earth file, let me know, put it in the comments and let me know, and I'll see what we can do to encourage the FAA to expand that to the lower 48. Something else that has come as a result of things that we have asked for, and this was part of the FAA reauthorization back in 2024, is a dashboard. And you think, okay, dashboard of what, Adam? Well, we have for a long time wanted to know what the status is of AWOS and ASOS stations, these weather stations, not just here in Alaska, but across the nation. Some of these have had long-term outages, and we simply just didn't know why or what was being done to fix them, what the status was, how long we could anticipate those being out. So as part of the FAA reauthorization bill back in 2024, there was language inserted in there that directed the FAA to develop a dashboard, and they have done that. It's now on the Weather Camera website, and I'll show you screenshot of that here again from another slide from the presentation I've been giving here the past few weeks at the gathering and at Valdez. Kind of shows you what you can anticipate there, and it's again on the weather camera website, and I know you go to and look at the weather camera website before you fly, and it's a new tab at the top, AWOS, ASOS. You click on that and then you can search for the status of those weather stations. And so that's great to see that. However, I would like to see that expanded beyond just weather stations. However, the FAA reauthorization bill was limited to weather stations and not to other infrastructure like navigation aids or weather cameras or other things that we know are problematic for keeping up and running. Was told by the FAA that the reauthorization bill was specific and only AWOS and ASOS, and due to budget constraints, that's what they're limited to with this product. So again, we got what we asked for, but the FAA is not going to go beyond that at this time. So again, if you would see some value and benefit to including this capability beyond just weather stations to other things like nav aids or weather cameras, please let me know. Write those in the comments, and I will add that to the voice of others and our ask for the FAA, and we can see if we can find some funding that may go back and add to that at some point. Something else that no word just yet. I've talked about this quite a bit. Again, I'm referencing my cheat sheet here of talking points. Part 108. We haven't seen that final rule come out just yet, and there's a lot of speculation as to what's going on within the FAA, as to why that's been delayed. They were really eager to get that done and get it out, but there seems to be a delay now, and there's speculations as to why, but that's just what they are, so I'm not going to speculate here on YouTube. You always get yourself in trouble when you do that, but part of that 108 proposal included electronic conspicuity as a possible mitigation and traffic deconfliction. That also hasn't been talked about by the FAA in an official capacity just yet. So we're curious to see what that looks like when it does become released in public, and see what we can do with that. Now, you remember electronic conspicuity. We've talked about that in the past. That's a hard word to say fast 3 times, but essentially it is a low power, portable, non-rule compliant ADS-B out broadcast tool. It is portable, completely anonymous, not tied to an airframe or to a pilot certificate or anything like that. And it is a peer-to-peer traffic deconfliction tool. It's a phrase that we use a lot to describe that. It will not allow you to get into rule-mandated airspace, Class Charlie or Class Bravo or Class Alpha, but it will help you see other traffic in the area, because you would be then broadcasting your position, very similar to what we have for full-blown ADS-B, but a much less expensive, battery-powered, portable product. The FAA mentioned that that could be a mitigation for traffic deconfliction between drones. However, they are now kind of going back and looking at that because of some influence and comments from folks like the Alaska Airmen's Association and others, Amazon being one of those, saying that ADS-B on its own is not sufficient for traffic deconfliction between drones and crewed aircraft. So we'll see what that final rule looks like when it does come out. Something else that has been a big conversation piece, and it was talked about a lot at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, and especially at Valdez, because some of the competitors were dealing with this issue firsthand, is customs. And how do we clear to get into Alaska at Northway? And Northway has become more and more problematic with clearing with U.S. Customs, and folks have been encouraged or told that the only way they could clear was to go all the way to Fairbanks or to Anchorage from Whitehorse. We know that that is beyond the range of a lot of aircraft, and so Customs was, and still is, giving the option of a tech stop and toke, and that is just to land and refuel, have no interactions with anyone else, and then continue on your journey. That, however, is a little problematic if you're not wanting to go to Fairbanks or to Anchorage, like the folks who wanted to go to Valdez and didn't want to go all the way to Anchorage and then fight the weather to get back to Valdez to participate in that STOL event. Now, there were some folks that were able to clear Northway, but that is not the norm. So I had a conversation with Customs after the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering and before Valdez. Good conversation with the port director there at Anchorage International, talking through some of these issues. And again, very thankful for those firsthand accounts from some of you that I was able to share with the port director. And that was very helpful for them to be able to take that to their leadership and give some real world examples of how this is impacting our ability to travel to and from our state. So again, thank you for that feedback from a lot of you. I do appreciate that. Just quickly going through some other things here, because there's a lot of things to talk about, but we're going to try to keep it to this 20-minute mark like we do. Lake Hood maintenance closure, their typical summer maintenance for the gravel runway is scheduled for June 1st through June 5th. Now, just a reminder, if you're based at Lake Hood, or if you hope to be able to get over to Lake Hood and you are not ADSB out equipped, you probably want to reposition your aircraft before that closure, because Anchorage International, while they will allow you to taxi over and take off and land from Anchorage International if you're based at Lake Hood or if you're trying to get to a facility at Lake Hood, they will allow you to do that, but only if you are ADSB compliant. There is no waiver, there is no ability to get an exemption to be able to come in and out of Anchorage International to get to or from Lake Hood because of that maintenance closure for the gravel runway. Obviously, if you're on floats, not a big deal. You just act, business as usual, coming and going in and out of the Class Delta if you're not ADSB equipped. But if you are wheeled based and you want to fly and come in and out of Anchorage, you're going to be limited to Merrill Field most likely. So pre-position your aircraft if you're based at Lake Hood for that June 1st through possibly all the way to the 5th maintenance closure of the gravel runway at Lake Hood. Looking through some other stuff, the Administrative Order 360 that I've talked about in previous updates, where the state of Alaska is looking to streamline some of our rules and regulations, especially when it comes to aviation and with DOT. We can expect, I got an update just here recently, that we can expect another round to be able to look at their proposal and comment on what they are proposing, they being DOT, as far as some of those regulation streamlining. We can expect to see an opportunity to do that sometime late this summer, is what I'm hearing, to be able to review that and comment. So when I tell you it's out there, I need you to read through it and I need you to comment. I need you to give some feedback. Tell me as part of your feedback, but tell DOT directly. And when that time comes, you will be told how to do that. I'll make sure to get that news out there to you. Next, in public engagement for the J-Park expansion, the Joint Pacific Alaska Range Complex, military operation areas, all those things. There's some talk of expanding that. They are in the scoping phase right now. Those comment periods closed. We've talked about that in previous updates. I just want to remind you that you haven't missed anything because you haven't heard anything in a while. Anticipated next time for public engagement is going to be March of 2027, so stand by for that. Just a reminder, the master plans that are in the works or that will be in the works, Palmer is in the middle of a master plan update right now. Lake Hood is going to start a master plan update next year in 2027, so pay attention for information about that and encourage you to participate in those proceedings. Something else that came up right before the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, there was an announcement from the Bureau of Land Management that they had transferred some land to the Eklutna Native Corporation in the Knik Basin. And there was a lot of questions and concerns about what will that do for access to the Knik area. It's a big recreational area, not just for aviation, but for all-terrain vehicles and boaters and other things, hikers. And so there's been some confusion as to what actual pieces of land were transferred and what will that access now look like. I've been working that issue back and forth between the gathering and Valdez, talking to our friends over at the RAF, the Recreational Aviation Foundation, and looking at some of these things. And right now it doesn't appear that it's going to greatly impact the aviation access, but we're still waiting on confirmation from the Oklutna Corporation as to some of the exact specific areas and things, because the maps that were provided by the Bureau of Land Management were decent, but not as detailed as we'd like. Let's put it that way. Okay, so going down a little bit further here we go. Yeah, the Anchorage Tower, Anchorage International Control Tower, that you remember we had talked about that. They're building a new control tower, and then it just kind of disappeared, that whole project. The bid process was stopped and kind of went nowhere. Well, I just found out that that bid process is opened back up, and that project is not dead, and that the FAA is moving ahead with looking for bids to build a new air traffic control tower at Anchorage International. So be looking for some more information about that as it becomes available. Two more issues here right quick. At the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, there was a presentation about unleaded fuels. I'm not sure if you were involved in that or not. I was there in the room, and I heard some troubling things. And so I had a conversation with the presenter afterwards, and we're not going to get into the specifics of the who and the how and the why, but there were some statements made in that presentation that I had some issues with. So I went up front and talked, and to be honest with you, I still have some concerns because of things that are being presented by that particular company that I feel are not entirely accurate. Now, they are not truly false either, completely false. They're, I would say, are misleading and inaccurate. And that centers around the fate of 100 low lead after January 1st of 2030. The statement was made that essentially 100 low lead will be illegal after January 1st, 2030, and that is not the case. That is not a hard, fast deadline by the FAA. There is no legislative requirement that it be dead at that point. There are some criteria that need to be met in order for 100 low lead to be pulled off the market. And this particular company feels like that they have a product that would meet those. However, the industry doesn't fully agree with them at this point. So I'm working through that issue, getting some clarification, and trying to make sure that there is a true and accurate and complete, complete being the accurate, the bigger word than just accurate, complete and accurate representation of where we are in the process of an unleaded fuel transition and where we are with all of the candidate fuels that are presently out there on the market. So speaking of unleaded fuels, you can anticipate hearing an announcement very soon of some 100 low lead replacement fuels, an unleaded replacement candidate for that process. Is going to bring some 100 some of their fuel. Again, it is a high octane. They are calling it a 100 octane fuel, and that announcement will be made very soon, and it will be available at Merrill Field for purchase. Now, there's some paperwork you would have to do to be able to legally burn that fuel, but one thing we have asked for is some quantities of candidate fuels available here in Alaska for us to burn and use in the real world. So look for an announcement about that, probably related to the Merrill Field open house that will be on Saturday, May 30th. So pay attention to that event and some of the announcements that may be coming on the horizon for that. So again, wanted to update you on a lot of these things, but there's always more things to talk about than the time that we have, and I want to thank you for watching these videos, letting me know that you appreciate the content that I provide here. I want to say thank you for your participation and your membership in the Alaska Airmen's Association. It was great to see all of you at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. A lot of uses of the word great there, but it really was a great weekend, even though the weather was not ideal. still a wonderful time to visit and talk and find out how you're doing and what your plans are for the summer. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Again, thank you for your membership. If you're not a member of the Alaska Airmen's Association, I encourage you to go to our website and take care of that today, because adding your voice to the more than 2,000 other members really does help when we go and advocate for our aviation concerns and needs here in the state of Alaska.